Hello and welcome to Photoshop 101. I'm Julie Powell and you're here for part 2 where I'm going to go through the basics of Photoshop. In this tutorial we're just going to concentrate on the toolbar and various bits and pieces that you can do. So it's over here, usually on the left, but you can actually grab it and you can move it around and put it wherever you like. So it's up to you where you want to put it, whatever easier for your workflow. So this is your move tool or your grab tool, if you like, which allows you to move various things around on your page. Now that has got, each one of these, it's got a little arrow in the corner. It means that it's got multiple properties that you can open, but generally speaking you just stick with the move tool. The next one is your marquee tool, so you, same again, can hold that and it'll open, and you've got a rectangular marquee tool or an elliptical marquee tool. You can do a single row or a single column, but they generally don't get used. Then you have your lasso tool. Again, you've got a standard lasso tool, a polygonal lasso tool and a magnetic lasso tool. Each of these are used for slightly different reasons, usually making a selection on your page. We'll get into these a little bit later as well. Then you have your selection tool. Now there's a quick selection tool and a magic wand tool. These are quite different, and there's different reasons why you would use these in a particular piece that you're working on. So quick selection is great if you have something, for instance, on a white background and you want to pick it off and remove the background, you can do that. Magic wand is if you've got something of a certain color you might want to remove from the background, but again we'll go through that in more detail. Then you have your crop tool. There's just a basic crop tool, so if you want to make something smaller or larger you can do it that way. You can actually set your ratio, so if you want to have it like just a square, or if you want it an 8 by 10 or a 5 by 7 for the standard size photos, you can crop that in there. You can set your own ratio if you want to as well, and then you just click tick to have it done, and that'll just crop that for you. The other things I generally don't tend to use. The eyedropper, you can use that for picking colours. So if you're working on something and you want to change the colour, you can use the eyedropper and that will then change what you're working on. The Band-Aid, now this is a great little tool that gives you your spot healing brush. There's a healing brush, there's a patch tool, a content aware tool and a red eye tool. So there's actually quite a lot in here, and a lot of it does get used from time to time, whether it's fixing up dirty marks from a dirty sensor, or it might be a pimple on somebody's face. They all get used. Then you've got your brush. Now depending on which version of Photoshop, you've got various different brushes in here. So you've got your brush tool, pencil tool, your color replacement tool and your mixer brush. Generally, to start with, we're just going to be using your brush tool. Now this is, when you select that, it gives you a circle and that lets you know that you're in your brush tool, and this is where we come up to your properties bar. In particular, so your brush tool, it tells you what kind or what size brushes there are in here. This one is all your different brushes. Now you can change the way that that's laid out, so you can have it as text only if you know what you want to call your brushes. You can have small thumbnails, which is what I've generally got it set to. You can have it as large thumbnails that give you sort of a bit more of a shape of what it is, and go through there. You can also load brushes. If you make brushes, which we'll get into later. You can save them in here. So that's your brush bar. Now you've got different modes. In general, we will just be sticking to normal. We will get into other modes later on. This is your opacity. So when you're painting, if you've got it set to 100%, it's completely opaque and you can't see through it. If you drop that down to whatever, it becomes quite transparent and you can't see it very well. So there's different transparencies you can have. Then you've got flow, which is actually how much comes out at once. So you might have it set to say 100%, but it's not coming out quite as much. So it's very soft and translucent on the edges. This is particularly handy if you're using a tablet. But we're just using a mouse at the moment. So you can play around with that and decide what you want to, different flows and different opacities you can use for varying different uses. Now this is your clone stamp tool, another very useful tool where you use to pick something up from one particular area and you can clone it somewhere else. Then we've got the history brush, the eraser. Neither of these I tend to use very much. Your gradient tool, I do use this one a little bit, but I tend to use it in a different way in my layer masks, which we'll get into later. The paint bucket tool, I don't generally tend to use those much either. You've got a sharpen, a smudge and a blur tool. They can be quite handy, but again there are other ways of sharpening an image or putting a blur on an image that is non-destructive, which we'll get into a bit more. Dodge and burn, so you can add highlights or you can add extra shadows. Again, there's easier ways to do it. Your pen tool, quite a difficult tool to master, and quite frankly we won't be getting into that until quite a bit later. Then you've got your text tool. Again, you've got a pop out, so you've got horizontal text and you've got vertical text, so you can have text going this way or you can have text going down this way. So you've got your different fonts which come preloaded. You can add other fonts to it as well. So we just pick a font, whether you want it regular or italic, the font size, whether you want it left or right adjusted, your colour, and then we can also do some really cool things with it too. So I'm just going to type that in there, and if you want to, you could warp that. So you could have it in an arc going up, going down, you can have it as a wave, you can do all sorts of things and adjust those as you would like as well. So that's in your text tool. If you wanted to, for instance, you want to type down, just place that there and it will go down that way. So your text is still aligned the right way, it's just going down the page instead of across it. Then you have your path selection tool. Again, probably won't get into that at the moment. You have your shape tool. Now this is quite handy. You've got a rectangle, rounded, ellipses and custom shapes. So this is very different from your marquee tool. Your rectangle or your custom shape tool, any of these, you can set that as shape or a path. Now if you set it as a shape, it will give you, as you would imagine, just a shape. This one I've actually got to set as a outline stroke on the outside only. I could turn that off and come into fill and make that any colour I want. Now it's dropped off here because it's not on the page. If I grab my move tool, and I can move it over back onto the page again. So that's your shape layer. You can also come into custom shapes and set that to shape. Colour, you can put an outline on it, whatever size you want. If you come along to here, you've got all sorts of different shapes that are preloaded. So if you wanted to put a pussycat in, you can put that in as well. Now you can't see him because I've got it set to red. So let's go pick another colour for the pussycat, and then he turns up. Couple of these other bits and pieces generally don't tend to use. This is your colour picker. So you've got your foreground at the front and your background behind, and you can toggle between the two of them. This is quite handy when we start getting into more things where we're using different layers. And these little button here, that is your default. So you can set it to black and white. And again, we'll get into reasons for that later. Most of these, of course, have a shortcut for your keyboard. Your move tool, which is Control or Command if you're on a Mac, V. Your brush is Control or Command B. Your eraser is E. Your stamp tool or your clone stamp tool is S. Your text tool is T. Most of them are fairly self-evident. So that's pretty much everything on the toolbar. Next time we come in, we will open up a document and just start playing around with doing a few basic bits and pieces. Bye for now.